Mental health and mental health recovery is very important to me, and it is really important to this community. Mental health for me has been an interesting phenomenon in my most recent role as Deputy Superintendent here in Racine Unified. Being involved in the Mental Health Collaborative for Racine County, I've learned a lot about mental health in and of itself, but more importantly, about how mental health has impacted me. I want to say that about a year ago, I had an opportunity to view a movie called Call Me Crazy at Gateway Technical College. And from seeing that movie, it really kind of jogged my memory around some things that I had experienced about 20 years ago in my military service, serving in Desert Storm. Shortly after I got off active duty, I went through a bout of anxiety and dealing with that, and went to seek some therapy for those anxiety attacks. But over the last 20 years, I've obviously come up with coping mechanisms and strategies to deal with that. But that movie really made me understand what recovery was really all about, and how I had been basically living in recovery for the last 20 years. That night really sparked me to have the courage to go back to the Veterans Administration and have a new eval done to really kind of find out what is my status with mental health. When I think of one word that describes that journey, I think of resilience. And when I think about resilience, I think about my upbringing as a child and the kind of the attributes and character traits that I've developed over time, being a child, living in abject poverty, and all of the things that come along with overcoming those challenges. I learned to have that grit. So when I was going through this 20 years ago, I just resorted to those skills and trying to overcome, really fighting this idea of being identified as a person that was crazy, that had come back from Desert Storm and didn't know how to deal with regular life. So having that, that was my objective at that time. And now, understanding what recovery is, I'm really not only becoming more of an advocate for mental health, but I really want to be able to understand what that journey is all about.
2012, my stepsister was murdered in the Azana spa shooting. For a couple of years, I never thought I had a mental illness. I thought I was completely fine until I started crying almost every day. I had no determination, no drive for anything I once felt passionate about. And that's when I decided I really needed to find some help. One thing that has been very therapeutic for me is advocating for domestic violence and sexual assault. I am now Miss Racine, and my platform is Step Up Abuse Intervention and Prevention Education, where I go around schools and community events talking about domestic violence and sexual assault. Not just being aware of these issues, but learning how to intervene and prevent these issues from ever occurring. It has been therapeutic for me because it's led me to realize some of the stuff that I needed to address personally. For example, my sister, I never got over her death, and advocating for this made me realize that I needed to address that I needed to see a therapist. And it's also opened my eyes to see that domestic violence has always been a part of my life. And also seeing a lot of my friends looking at their past relationships and seeing that they were in violent relationships and they too have been sexually assaulted. And I've even dedicated my college career and hopefully my professional career someday to domestic violence and sexual assault by studying legal studies at UW-Madison. One day I hope to go to law school and become a lawyer for these victims of such tragic crimes. For those of you struggling with mental illness, a word I have for you to remember is hope. Not one path is the same, but every path does have hope. And mental illness is not a death sentence. It is something you can conquer, and it is something you can get through. It is not something that defines you. For me, I thought for a very long time, I felt hopeless. I thought that losing my sister was just something I had to get over and that I had to live through for the rest of my life. But that's not the case. I conquered it. I conquered this depression and anxiety, and every day I have to fight to strive towards that happiness that I always hope for.
I was diagnosed in 1997 with recurrent major depression, and at that point in time the doctors did not see the manic side of my illness. Having bipolar disorder means that I have periods where I have depression, and the depression feels like I can't function very well because everything is slowed down. I can't think clearly. I have a lot of negative thinking. Everything looks bad and bleak and black to me when I'm in a depression. I have no energy. I have no interest in things that I usually like to do. On the other hand, the other part of my illness is the manic side. And mania, there's different kinds of mania, and first I experience hypomania. That feels very good to me. I laugh a lot. I think everything is funny. I sing and I talk very loudly, and people at work will say, "Mary, you're getting a little hypomanic?" I'd say, no, I feel great. What are you talking about? The problem with that is that it doesn't last very long, and I'll either go back into the depression or it'll escalate into a full-blown manic episode. Now for me, mania feels angry, irritable, cranky, and nasty. Once I took that first step, that's when the doors started to open and the magic started happening, because though it was difficult, it was hard work, I was making progress and I was getting better. So taking that first step makes all the difference. And my recovery for me, it feels like joy. I remember, I like to say, when I was born in 1957, I began to live in 1997, because that's when I started to recover from my illness. And when I look back on my life, so much of it was filled with depression and sadness. And now I'm free of that. And so that's why it feels like joy to me now. I speak to people in the community about mental illness, and the ones that are some of my favorite audiences are the high school students and middle school students in Racine Unified and other school districts in Racine County. I enjoy the teens because they ask so many questions. They are thirsty for this information because they have friends or relatives that are experiencing mental illness of some kind, or just having a real hard time and they need some extra help and they want someone to talk to that. I also talk to people in the prison, both the women's and the men's prisons in Racine County, and again, there they are thirsty for this information because a lot of them have a mental illness, and that is how they ended up in prison. And so once they got to prison, then they started getting treatment for their illness, and they realized that had they gotten treatment sooner, they may not have been incarcerated. So that I feel real privileged to do those kinds of presentations. It benefits my recovery, so I think I'm kind of selfish. I get a lot out of this, doing these presentations. One of the things when I have depression is that I'm afraid that someone is going to find out that I have a mental illness. And I was terrified of that. Somebody's going to find out. No one's going to want to be my friend. No one's going to want to rent to me or give me a job. And so I was so terrified of that I didn't want to tell anybody. But now I just tell everybody, and then I don't have to worry about them finding out. So that works for me.
I grew up with a mother who silently suffered from depression and anxiety, and a father who was overtly challenged with alcoholism. And as a child, I believed that if I was perfect and if I accomplished a great deal, they would love me. Unfortunately, no matter what I did, their world didn't change, leaving me feeling hopeless and undeserving of love. As a teenager, I was externally happy, outgoing, and driven. Yet internally, I was melancholy, hopeless, and quite pessimistic. After graduating from high school, I thought that going away to college would be helpful. Unfortunately, it was the opposite. I fell into a hole of darkness and gloom. where I often thought about suicide. Something had to change. I went to the university's counseling center, and that was honestly one of the best decisions I have ever made. It was then that I learned that my symptoms had a name, mainly depression. There were other people who felt exactly the same way, so I was not alone. And third, and most importantly, there was something that I could do by getting treatment. I was determined to break the silent cycle of mental illness, to feel free and well. It took a lot of hard work, a lot of persistence, a lot of knocking on different doors to get medication, the right medication and the right therapy. But it was all well worth it. Today, I feel an internal harmony. There is no external versus internal. I'm okay, I'm content, but I continuously work to reach my potential. Having gone through this journey, I thought, if I could do this, other people can do it too. So for the past 10 years, I have been working on a mental health website that promotes mental health through information and education. I honestly hope that this website inspires people to take the first step.